مسکا نجیب در شهر لندن. مسکا نجیب دخترفقید دکتورنجیب الله رئیس جمهورسابق افغانستان، یک تن از روزنامه‌نگاران، عکاس و تدوینگر آموزش دیده است که تحصیلاتش را در کشورهای هند و سوئیس به انجام رسانیده است. اگرچه او بیشتر عمر خود را در خارج از افغانستان گذرانده است، اما به تاریخ، فرهنگ و سنت‌های با ارزش افغانستان علاقمندی فراوان دارد. مسکا نجیب به تاریخ 11 جولای 2024 نمایشگاه زیبایی از عکاسی‌های جالب خود را که از مراسم مذهبی برادران سیک و اهل هنود افغانستان تهیه نموده بود، در سالن سواس یونیورسیتی به نمایش گذاشت که مورد استقبال شگرف برادران اهل هنود و سیک افغانستان قرار گرفته و با ایراد بیانیه‌های آن را تحسین نمودند.
Majority and minority. I definitely feel like a minority on this table, being a woman, but also amongst such wonderful experts and who are so knowledgeable. So I approached this project a bit differently because I was brought in as a visual artist to document non-Muslim communities. One community being from my country of home. Where I've come up with, hearing their stories and their tales and their narratives. And what was really interesting for me was 12 years ago, I had started my search of where my sense of belonging is. And that began with another photography project about the Kabuliwalas of Kolkata. Some of you might know about it. If you don't, there's a website, you can check the work. But what was interesting about that project was the idea that nostalgia played a very important role, and the whole notion of preserving your identity for a community who had been disconnected from their roots for centuries, and they were fourth and third generations. So when it came to the non-Muslim communities of Central Asia, I was consciously told by my colleagues who I worked with, Musca, we're shifting away from identity. Be a bit flexible. Think about belonging. And it is a question that I kept posing for myself as well. How do we really truly belong to a place, a space? And before we could actually come up with this title, Belonging Flexibly, it was first called The Afterlives. And for many people who speak Dari here, if you actually translate that in Farsi, it means Zindagi Bad az Marg. So it's the life after death. That's what you can literally translate it to. And for me, there was a dichotomy because we were talking about spaces for life, emphasizing on the living and the continuation and fluidity of identity, while at the same time having to let go of the past, of what that identity and sense of belonging is. Dr. Hanifi brought in a very interesting part about documenting and documentation. And I think what's really important in the work that I do is it's a way of preserving that heritage by visually documenting in spaces and time the stories of such communities. I think for me, the most interesting part about the communities that I focused on, which were the Afghan and Hindu communities in London, the diaspora, and the Bukharan Jews in Vienna. They were very different in terms of the challenges they were facing. Visually, I think what was really interesting, I'll start the other way around since we talked about Bukharan Jews. We spent an entire day, Dr. Vera and myself, in a graveyard. It was one of the most daunting experiences I've ever had. But the emphasis that was given on graves and the extent to which these graves were named and carved and images were being placed to be able to identify for generations to come who their ancestors were was quite an interesting, I think, orientation in how we see the death and the living as well. For me personally, I think as I've grown older, I've seen that I've lost my loved ones in different geographies and different places, and they've been buried in different places, in UK, in Germany, in the Middle East, in Afghanistan. So to be able to have a home and a belonging, of course, is very relevant and very, very important. But we also come from, if we go back all the way to the Neanderthal times, there were no geographies and boundaries. So we are always in flux, and we're always traveling, and we've been made nomadic in nature. Through this particular project, I think what was very difficult as a photographer was that I couldn't, for visa restrictions as well, but I couldn't go back to the cities of origin. And I tried to use that as a way of focusing on the afterlives of these communities. So the Afghan, Sikh and Hindu communities in London, they are in Southall. If you haven't gone, you'll meet them. And one of the most contrasting parts about that, this particular community that I noticed, was the fact that even though they now have a very, very active life in London, their shops and their settlements are near Muslim neighborhoods and Muslim localities. So the elements of interaction between the Muslim communities and the Afghan Sikhs and Hindus is something that continues to remain in new spaces that they've built and created. Similarly, it was very interesting one afternoon we'd gone to meet the president of the Bukharan Jewish community.
चितकारा जिथे ने सेवा चरित्र ट्रस्ट के मेंबर साहब ऑन साढ़े नाल हन गुरु हरगोबिंद साहब ट्रस्ट के मेंबर हन गुरु हरराज साहब किंगस्टन गुरुद्वारे के मेंबर साहबान हन साढ़े नाल सेवा सोसाइटियां अते सब तो वध साढ़े नाल साड़ी अफगान हिंदू सिख सोसाइटियां दा संबंध
قابل یادهانی است که عده‌ای از آنان از حق و حقوق و عزت و احترامی که در دوران حاکمیت دکتر نجیب الله برخوردار بودند نیز به نیکویی و قدردانی یاد کردند. در اخیر خانم فتانه نجیب همسر دکتر نجیب الله نیز طی صحبت کوتاه از ابراز احساسات آنان سپاسگزاری نموده و همچنان از کار و تلاش دخترش مسکا نجیب در ارجگذاری ارزش‌های فرهنگی مردم سرزمینش ابراز رضایت کرد.
وقتی که دختر من 2.5 سال پیش آمد به لندن، بر من گفت که در جمع یک خانواده گرم از برادران اهل هنود خود بر من گفت عدی من هیچ احساس بیگانگی نمی کردم به خاطر که اینا اقا به من محبت دادن، اقا به من کمک کردن، اقا به من لطف کردن که من خدا احساس نمی کردم که از خانه و خانواده دور هستم. و امروز ما که می بینم واقعا با وجودی که ما در کشور همه ما و شما در کشور خود نیستیم، اما ببینم که اما فضای پر از محبت و پر از صمیمیت در عالم مهاجرت، در عالم دوری از وطن قلبای ما را از یکدیگر دور نساخته. قلبای ما بسیار نزدیک است و ما با دختر خود مسکا افتخار میکنم، برش تبریک میگم، برش موفقیت میخوایم که امو احساسی که پدرش در قبال برادران اهل هنود خود داشت، امو احساس دختر من. و ما از همه محبت شما، از همه گرمی شما، از همه احساس شما یگانه تشکر میکنم. بسیار تشکر.
خوش برادری نمایندگی اپنے والوں گلدستہ پیش کر رہے ہیں مسکا جان و پروفیسر صاحب.